The emergency beacon screamed across the void of space, its desperate signal carrying the weight of an entire civilization's final hope. On the bridge of the cargo vessel Gentle Current, Captain ZYXI of the Valerian Republic clutched his communication console with trembling claws. His normally pristine blue scales had turned pale with fear, and his large golden eyes darted nervously between his crew members.
"Are you certain this is our only option?"
First Officer Nimera asked, her voice barely above a whisper. She was young for a Valerian, having served only 15 cycles in the merchant fleet. The idea of what they were about to do filled her with dread. "The Korthan Empire has already destroyed 3 of our outer colonies," ZYXI replied, his voice heavy with resignation. "Their war fleets are moving toward our core systems.
We have perhaps 2 rotations before they reach Valeria Prime."
He paused, staring at the communication array. Every major power in the galaxy has either fallen to the Korthan or signed non-aggression pacts.
We are alone.
The Korthan Empire was a nightmare made manifest in the physical realm. For over 2,000 years, they had swept across the galaxy like a plague of metal and fire. Their ships were massive, their weapons devastating, and their hunger for conquest seemed endless.
They did not negotiate, they did not show mercy, and they did not leave survivors.
Every world that fell under their shadow became another resource node in their ever-expanding war machine.
"What about the Galactic Council?" Navigation Officer Torben suggested weakly.
He was an older Valerian, his scales marked with the silver patterns that came with age and wisdom.
"Surely they cannot ignore such a massive threat." ZYXI let out a bitter laugh that echoed through the small bridge. "The Council dissolved itself 3 cycles ago.
The Korthan had already conquered half their member species. The remainder scattered to whatever corners of the galaxy they thought might be safe." He activated the main display, showing a tactical map of known space. Red zones marked Korthan territory, and they covered nearly 60% of the galaxy. The remaining crew members on the bridge exchanged worried glances. Engineer Pal9 nervously adjusted his tool harness, while communications specialist Vecna stared at her console as if it might provide some miracle solution. They all knew what their captain was considering, and none of them wanted to voice the obvious question.
Finally, Nimera spoke what they were all thinking. "You want to send a distress call to the unknown sectors."
The unknown sectors were exactly what their name suggested, vast regions of space that had never been properly explored or mapped by the major galactic powers. Most civilizations avoided these areas, partly because they were dangerous and unpredictable, but mainly because the few species that had been contacted from these regions were considered primitive and unreliable. There were stories, of course, whispered tales told in the darker corners of space stations and trading posts. Stories of strange species with unusual technologies and incomprehensible military tactics. "There are rumors," ZYXI said slowly, "of a species in Sector 7749. The databases list them as humans, a young race that has only recently achieved interstellar travel. They are classified as pre-contact civilization, barely worth monitoring according to the old galactic survey records." Torben's scales rippled with skepticism.
"Captain, with respect, what could a primitive species possibly do against the Korthan Empire? If the combined fleets of 12 major civilizations could not stop them, how could some unknown aliens from the edge of nowhere make any difference?" It was a fair question, and ZYXI knew it.
The logical part of his mind agreed completely.
But desperation had a way of making even the most unlikely options seem worth considering.
"The survey reports mention something unusual about their military organization," he said, calling up the ancient files on his display.
"Apparently, they have an unusual response to threats."
The survey team noted that they seem to maintain massive military reserves despite having no major enemies in their local region. "That makes no sense," Vecna commented, finally, looking up from her station.
"Why would a species maintain large military forces without an immediate threat? It's economically wasteful." "Perhaps," ZYXI admitted.
"But we have exhausted every other possibility. The Korthan will be here soon, and we have nowhere else to turn." He moved to his captain's chair, a decision crystallizing in his mind. "Vecna, prepare a standard distress beacon. Include our situation, our location, and a request for immediate military assistance." The communications specialist hesitated. "Sir, the protocols for first contact are very specific. We are supposed to go through the diplomatic corps, establish cultural parameters, assess technological compatibility." "The diplomatic corps is dead," ZYXI cut her off sharply. Their headquarters was in the Altair system.
The Korthan blasted 6 cycles ago.
He softened his tone slightly, recognizing that his crew was struggling with the same fears he faced. We are beyond protocols now.
We are simply trying to survive.
Nimera moved to her station and began running calculations. If we send the signal now, it will take approximately 4 standard hours to reach the outer edge of human space, assuming their monitoring stations are positioned similarly to ours. Response time would depend on their military deployment patterns and decision-making speed.
How much time do we have before the Korthan arrive? ZYXI asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer.
Torben consulted his navigation charts. Their advanced scouts will likely reach our position within 36 hours. The main fleet will follow within 60 hours. The mathematics were simple and terrifying. Even if the humans responded immediately, even if they had ships positioned near the edge of their territory, even if they decided to help a species they had never encountered before, it would be an extremely close timing. And that assumed they had anything useful to contribute to a fight against the most feared military force in the galaxy. There is something else to consider, Engineer Pal 9 said quietly. All eyes turned to him, and he shifted uncomfortably under their attention.
The humans are listed as a Class 7 civilization.
That means their technology level is significantly below standard galactic norms. Their ships might not even have proper shielding against Korthan weapons. This was the heart of their dilemma, and everyone on the bridge knew it. They were essentially gambling their species' survival on the hope that a primitive alien race might somehow possess capabilities that the greatest powers in the galaxy had lacked. It seemed absurd, desperate, and utterly hopeless.
But it was also their only remaining option. Send the signal, ZYXI ordered.
Include all relevant tactical data about Korthan fleet compositions, weapon capabilities, and operational patterns. If nothing else, perhaps these humans can at least warn other species in the unknown sectors about what is coming. Vecna's claws danced across her console with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, she had compiled a comprehensive distress package that included everything known about the Korthan threat, the Valerian Republic's current situation, and a desperate plea for assistance.
The message was transmitted on multiple frequencies, using standard galactic protocols that any spacefaring civilization should be able to decode.
Message transmitted, Captain, she reported. Signal strength is strong, and we should have good penetration into human space.
Now came the hardest part, waiting.
On the main display, the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. Long-range sensors showed the Korthan advance elements moving steadily toward Valerian space, their massive ships cutting through the void with terrifying purpose.
Each passing hour brought them closer to a confrontation that the Valerians could not possibly win. What do we know about human military capabilities? Nimera asked, settling into her station for what would likely be a long watch. Torben called up the survey files, though they were frustratingly limited.
According to the last update, which is over 50 years old, they have achieved basic faster-than-light travel and have established colonies in approximately 12 star systems. Their military appears to be organized around something they call nation-states rather than a unified planetary government.
That's unusual, Pal 9 commented.
Most species unify their military command structure before expanding beyond their home system.
Divided command leads to inefficiency and strategic confusion.
The survey notes suggest they have some kind of overarching coordination mechanism, Torben continued, but the details are unclear. They also mentioned something called NATO and UN peacekeeping forces, but these terms were not properly translated. ZYXI found himself wondering what kind of species they had just contacted. Everything in the survey report suggested a young, divided, technologically inferior civilization that should logically be of no help whatsoever against the Korthan.
Yet something about the gaps in the reports bothered him.
The Galactic Survey Service was normally quite thorough, but the human files seemed unusually sparse for a spacefaring species.
Captain, Vecna called out suddenly, I'm receiving an acknowledgement signal. Everyone on the bridge froze.
The response had come far sooner than anyone had expected, which could mean either very good news or very bad news.
In ZYXI's experience, it usually meant the latter.
Can you decode it? He asked, moving to stand behind the communications station. Working on it now, Vecna replied, her claws flying over her console.
The signal is unusually strong. Much stronger than it should be for a transmission from the edge of their territory. Either they have very powerful communications arrays, or
She paused, her golden eyes widening as she processed the data.
Or what? ZYXI prompted.
Or they have ships much closer to our position than we thought possible. She looked up at her captain with an expression of confusion mixed with something that might have been hope. Sir, this signal is coming from somewhere in the neutral zone, not from human space. The neutral zone was a buffer region between the major galactic powers and the unknown sectors. No major civilization maintained permanent installations there, and it was generally considered too dangerous for regular patrols. The idea that the humans might have ships operating in that region was both surprising and potentially encouraging.
What does the message say? Nimera asked, moving closer to the communications station. Vecna's expression grew even more puzzled as she worked through the translation protocols. It's very brief.
It says, message received.
Assessment in progress. Maintain position. Help is coming. She paused, double-checking her translation matrix. That's all.
No requests for additional information, no questions about our technological capabilities, no demands for political guarantees.
Just, help is coming. The bridge fell silent as the crew processed this unexpected development.
In their experience, first contact situations required extensive negotiations, careful diplomatic exchanges, and detailed assessments of mutual benefit. The idea that an unknown species would simply promise help based on a single distress call was completely outside their understanding of how interstellar politics worked.
How long ago was that signal transmitted? ZYXI asked.
Based on the signal delay, approximately 2 hours ago, Vecna calculated.
Which means they sent their response almost immediately after receiving our message.
This was becoming more mysterious by the moment. Not only had the humans responded with unusual speed, but they had apparently done so without any of the careful deliberation that such a situation would normally require. Either they were remarkably decisive, or they had some kind of pre-existing response protocol for exactly this type of situation.
Could this be some kind of automatic response?
Engineer Pal9 suggested. Perhaps their ships have programmed replies for distress calls?
Possible, ZYXI admitted, but the phrasing seems too specific. An automatic system would likely request more detailed information or refer us to proper diplomatic channels.
He returned to his command chair, his mind racing through the implications.
Continue monitoring all frequencies.
If they are truly sending help, we need to know what kind of force they can deploy and how quickly it will arrive.
As if summoned by his words, Vecna's console erupted in activity. Captain, I'm detecting multiple new signals.
They're all coming from the direction of human space, but they're much stronger than the first transmission.
How many signals? ZYXI asked, though part of him dreaded the answer.
I'm counting, 17, no, 23, the number keeps increasing. Vecna's voice carried a note of disbelief.
Sir, these aren't just communication signals.
I'm detecting faster-than-light disturbance patterns consistent with multiple ships dropping out of hyperspace. Torben immediately turned to his sensors, his claws dancing across the navigation console.
Confirmed.
I'm reading massive hyperspace exits approximately 6 hours away at current position. The energy signatures are unusual.
Unusual how? ZYXI demanded.
They're much larger than they should be for ships of the size indicated by the sensor returns, Torben explained, his voice filled with confusion.
Either their ships are much denser than normal, or their faster-than-light drives operate on completely different principles than ours.
The tactical display updated automatically, showing the new contact points as they appeared throughout the system. What ZYXI saw there made his scales ripple with shock. Instead of the small task force he had desperately hoped for, or the single scout ship he had realistically expected, the display showed dozens of contact points scattered throughout local space. Vecna, he said carefully, request confirmation of the number of ships in the human response force. The communications specialist sent the query and waited for a response. When it came, her golden eyes went wide with disbelief.
Captain, they say this is a preliminary assessment force. The main fleet is still assembling.
The bridge fell completely silent.
Everyone stared at the tactical display, trying to process what they were seeing.
The idea that dozens of ships could constitute merely a preliminary force was beyond their understanding. The entire Valerian Republic Navy consisted of fewer than 40 vessels, and most of those were merchant ships with basic defensive armaments.
There has to be some kind of misunderstanding, Nimera said weakly. Perhaps their translation protocols are malfunctioning.
But, even as she spoke, more contact points appeared on the display. The humans were arriving in waves, with new ships dropping out of hyperspace every few minutes. Each arrival was accompanied by the massive energy signatures that Torben had noted, suggesting that these vessels were either much larger or much more technologically advanced than their initial assessments had indicated. "Captain," Vecna called out, her voice tight with tension, "I'm receiving a new transmission."
It's addressed specifically to the Valerian Republic vessel Gentle Current.
"Put it through," ZYXI ordered, settling himself in his command chair and trying to project more confidence than he felt. The voice that filled the bridge was completely alien, yet somehow managed to convey authority and competence despite the obvious translation barriers.
"Valerian vessel Gentle Current, this is Admiral Sarah Chin of the Terran Combined Fleet.
We have received your distress call and are moving to assess the situation. Please transmit all available tactical data regarding the Korthan forces, including fleet compositions, weapons capabilities, and estimated arrival times." The request was professional, direct, and remarkably comprehensive. It suggested that the humans had some understanding of military operations and were taking the situation seriously.
But there was something else in the transmission that caught ZYXI's attention.
"Did she say Terran Combined Fleet?" he asked.
Vecna nodded, checking her translation matrix.
"That appears to be correct." She also used the rank Admiral, which suggests a unified military command structure, despite what the survey reports indicated about their political divisions. This contradiction was troubling, but ZYXI decided to worry about it later. Right now, his priority was providing the humans with the information they needed to understand what they were facing.
"Transmit all available data on the Korthan Empire," he ordered.
"Include fleet strengths, tactical patterns, weapon capabilities, and casualty reports from previous engagements." As Vecna worked to compile the massive data package, more human ships continued arriving. The tactical display now showed over 60 contact points, with more appearing every few minutes.
Whatever force the humans were assembling, it was far larger than anything ZYXI had dared to hope for. But size alone would not be enough against the Korthan.
The Empire had conquered civilizations with fleets numbering in the thousands. What mattered was technological capability, tactical skill, and sheer firepower. And, despite the impressive number of ships assembling in the distance, ZYXI had no way of knowing whether the humans possessed any of these crucial advantages.
"Data package transmitted," Vecna reported. "I've included everything in our databases about Korthan military capabilities."
The response came back with startling speed.
"Data received and processed. Analysis indicates significant threat level requiring full operational response. Additional forces are being deployed. Estimated time to full fleet arrival, 14 hours. ZYXI felt his heart skip a beat.
14 hours was cutting it extremely close, but it was within the timeframe they needed. More importantly, the humans were apparently taking the threat seriously enough to deploy what they called a full operational response.
Vecna, ask them what constitutes a full operational response.
The answer, when it came, left everyone on the bridge speechless.
Current deployment includes elements from 12 fleet commands representing 8 separate military organizations. Combined strength will exceed 800 combat vessels with full support elements.
Additional reserves are standing by if required.
800 ships.
The number was so large that ZYXI had trouble processing it. The entire Korthan fleet that was approaching Valerian space consisted of approximately 300 vessels, and that was considered an overwhelming force capable of conquering an entire star system.
"There has to be an error in the translation," Nimero whispered.
But, as they watched, more and more contact points continued appearing on their tactical display. The human fleet was growing at an exponential rate, with ships arriving from multiple vectors and assembling into complex formation patterns that suggested sophisticated command and control systems. "Captain," Torben called out, his voice filled with wonder, "I'm detecting some unusual energy signatures from the human fleet.
Their ships are different from anything I've seen before." "Different how?"
"Their power outputs are enormous, but their mass distributions don't match any known ship designs."
"And, sir."
He paused, double-checking his readings.
"Some of these ships are massive. I'm reading vessels that appear to be larger than anything in the Korthan fleet. This was impossible."
According to the survey reports, the humans were a primitive species with basic technology and limited industrial capacity. The idea that they could field hundreds of advanced warships was completely contradictory to everything in the official records.
Could the survey reports have been wrong? Engineer Pal 9 asked, voicing the question everyone was thinking.
Surveys can be inaccurate, ZYXI admitted, but not to this degree. The difference between what we were told about humans and what we're seeing here is too large to be explained by normal survey errors. A new possibility occurred to him, one that was both exciting and terrifying.
Vecna, when were the last official survey reports filed on human space?
She checked her database. The most recent entry is 57 years old, Captain. But there are several addendum notes indicating that follow-up surveys were planned but never completed due to budget constraints and higher priority assignments.
57 years.
More than enough time for a spacefaring species to undergo massive technological and military development, especially if they were motivated by external threats or internal competition. The humans might have evolved far beyond their initial survey classifications, and the galactic community had simply never bothered to check. We may have accidentally contacted a much more advanced civilization than we realized, ZYXI said slowly.
The implications were staggering.
If the humans were truly capable of fielding hundreds of advanced warships, they represented a major power that had somehow remained hidden from galactic politics for over half a century. The question now was whether they would be willing and able to help the Valerian Republic against the Korthan Empire.
As if reading his thoughts, another transmission arrived from Admiral Chen.
Valerian Command, we have completed our preliminary analysis. The Korthan Empire represents a significant threat to galactic stability and civilian populations. Terran Command has authorized full military intervention under the Humanitarian Protection Protocols. ZYXI had never heard of Humanitarian Protection Protocols, but the phrase sent a chill down his spine. It suggested that the humans had not only the capability to intervene in galactic conflicts, but also the legal and military framework to do so on their own authority. This was not the behavior of a primitive species receiving their first contact from the galactic community.
Admiral Chen, he transmitted back, we are grateful for your assistance, but I must ask, what is the Terran Combined Fleet? Our records indicate that humans are a recently contacted species with limited technological development.
The pause before the response was longer than usual, and, when it came, Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of what might have been amusement. Captain ZYXI, your galactic survey data appears to be somewhat outdated. The Terran Federation has been monitoring galactic activities for quite some time.
We simply chose to remain outside the major power structures until now. The bridge of the gentle current fell silent as the crew processed this information.
Everything they thought they knew about humans, about galactic politics, and about the survey systems they had relied upon for decades was apparently wrong. The humans were not a primitive species just achieving interstellar flight. They were an established power that had deliberately chosen to remain hidden from galactic politics.
Why reveal yourselves now? ZYXI asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer.
Because the Korthan Empire has finally become a threat that we can no longer ignore, Admiral Chen replied. We had hoped that the established galactic powers would eventually contain them. Since that has not occurred, we are prepared to do so ourselves.
The confidence in that simple statement was breathtaking. The humans were not just offering to help defend the Valerian Republic.
They were claiming the capability to contain a military force that had conquered half the known galaxy. As ZYXI stared at the tactical display showing hundreds of human ships assembling in local space, he began to suspect that they might actually be able to do it.
Admiral Saracen stood on the command deck of the UES Resolute, watching the tactical hologram display update in real time as more Terran Federation ships dropped out of hyperspace.
At 53, she had served in the Federation Navy for over 30 years, participating in conflicts that the galactic community never knew existed. Today would mark humanity's first open military action in what the aliens called known space. Admiral, we now have 412 vessels in formation, reported Commander Marcus Webb, her chief of staff. The young officer's voice carried a note of excitement that he was trying hard to suppress.
8th Fleet is still en route, ETA 6 hours.
12th Fleet reports ready to jump from Sol System on your orders.
Chen nodded, studying the deployment patterns on the holographic display.
The Terran Combined Fleet represented the largest military force humanity had ever assembled, drawn from 8 different military organizations that had been secretly coordinating for decades. ships bore the insignia of the Seoul Defense Force, the Colonial Marine Fleet, the Outer Rim Patrol, and 5 other commands that officially didn't exist according to galactic records. "Status on the Korthan forces?" she asked. "Intelligence Division confirms the Valerian data," replied Lieutenant Colonel Janet Rodriguez, the fleet's intelligence coordinator. Korthan advance elements consist of roughly 300 vessels, including 12 dreadnoughts and 36 heavy cruisers. Main battle doctrine emphasizes overwhelming firepower and psychological warfare through the complete destruction of civilian targets.
Chen's expression hardened.
She had read the classified reports about the Korthan Empire for years, watching as they consumed civilization after civilization while the Galactic Council debated and deliberated. The Federation had maintained strict non-interference policies, partly to avoid revealing their true capabilities and partly because the galactic powers had insisted they could handle the situation themselves. "Ma'am," called out Captain Lisa Park from the communications station, "we're receiving another transmission from the Valerian vessel. They're requesting clarification on our military capabilities and operational intentions."
"Put Captain ZYXI through," Chun ordered.
The alien's voice filled the command deck, carrying obvious stress despite the translation protocols. "Admiral Chen, I must admit that we are confused by the scale of your response. Our survey data indicated that humans were a recently contacted species with limited military capabilities. The force you have assembled appears to exceed the combined fleets of most galactic civilizations."
Chen exchanged glances with her senior staff.
They had all known this moment would come eventually, the point where humanity would have to reveal the truth about their activities in galactic space. "Captain ZYXI, your survey data is approximately 50 years out of date. During that time, the Terran Federation has been conducting extensive monitoring operations throughout the galaxy." Monitoring operations, the Valerian captain's voice carried a note of disbelief. "We have been observing galactic political developments, military conflicts, and technological progress," Chen explained. "When we first achieved interstellar travel, we discovered a galaxy already dominated by established powers. Rather than immediately announce our presence, we chose to learn and prepare." What she didn't mention was the real reason for humanity's caution. The first Terran exploration vessels had encountered evidence of the Korthan Empire within 5 years of leaving Earth's solar system. Early Federation strategists had quickly realized that humanity was entering a galaxy where genocidal conquest was not only possible but actively practiced on a massive scale. The decision to remain hidden while building military strength had been made at the highest levels of human government.
"Prepare for what?" ZYXI asked.
"For exactly this situation," Chen replied.
"We have been tracking the Korthan expansion for decades. We knew that eventually, they would become a threat that could not be ignored." On the tactical display, more Terran ships continued arriving.
The latest wave included vessels that had never been seen by alien observers, massive battlecruisers equipped with experimental weapons systems, stealth frigates capable of operating undetected in hostile space, and carrier vessels that could deploy hundreds of fighter craft. The Federation had spent 50 years building a military force designed specifically to fight the Korthan Empire.
"Admiral," Commander Webb reported, "we're receiving updates from forward observation posts.
Korthan advance scouts have been detected at the edge of the system. They appear to be conducting standard reconnaissance operations."
"How long before they report back to the main fleet?"
Chen asked.
"Assuming normal communication protocols, approximately 4 hours, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez answered.
"However, we should assume they will notice our fleet presence and report that as well." This was the moment Chen had been preparing for throughout her career. For decades, the Federation had maintained the fiction that humanity was a minor power with limited reach beyond their own star systems. Today, that fiction would end. The Korthan Empire would learn that they faced an opponent they had never anticipated.
"Signal the fleet," she ordered.
"All ships are to maintain current positions and prepare for combat operations.
Authorization level Alpha 7.
This is not a drill." Throughout the assembled fleet, human crews received the orders they had trained for but never expected to use. On the UES Leviathan, Captain David Zhang reviewed targeting data for the ship's experimental graviton cannons. Aboard the UES Thunderstrike, Commander Sarah Kim coordinated with her squadron of stealth destroyers, ships that had been practicing infiltration techniques in Korthan-controlled space for over a decade. "Admiral," Captain Park called out, "we're receiving a priority transmission from Fleet Command."
"It's Admiral Harrison."
The holographic display shifted to show Admiral Rebecca Harrison, commander of the Terran Defense Force and Chen's immediate superior. The older woman's expression was grim but determined.
Sarah, I'm transmitting updated authorization codes.
The Security Council has voted unanimously to authorize full disclosure and engagement protocols.
Chen felt a chill run down her spine. Full disclosure meant that humanity was abandoning 50 years of careful secrecy.
Engagement protocols meant they were prepared to fight a war that could reshape the entire galactic balance of power.
Understood, Admiral. What are my operational parameters? Complete neutralization of the Korthan threat, Harrison replied without hesitation.
Military command has determined that half measures will only result in prolonged conflict.
You are authorized to use any means necessary to eliminate the Korthan Empire as a viable military force. The implications were staggering.
Chen had expected orders to defend the Valerian Republic, perhaps to engage the immediate Korthan fleet threatening this system. Instead, she had just been given authorization to destroy an entire empire that controlled thousands of star systems and commanded millions of ships.
Admiral, are you certain about the scope of this operation? Chen asked.
The Korthan Empire represents a significant military force spread across hundreds of sectors.
Sarah, we've been preparing for this for 50 years, Harrison replied.
Intelligence estimates that the Korthan currently have approximately 4,000 active military vessels and another 8,000 in reserve or construction. We have 12,000 ships ready for immediate deployment, with another 20,000 in various stages of preparation. The numbers were mind-numbing. Chen had known that the Federation maintained large military reserves, but she had never realized the true scope of human naval capabilities. Apparently, while the galactic community had been struggling with the Korthan threat, humanity had been building the largest military force in galactic history.
How is this possible? She asked. The industrial capacity alone.
Earth's population is now approaching 12 billion, Harrison explained. The colonies have another 8 billion. We have over 200 fully developed industrial worlds and 600 mining operations.
Sarah, we're not the primitive species the aliens think we are.
We're the largest single civilization in the galaxy, and we've been hiding it for half a century.
Chen stared at the tactical display, trying to process what she was hearing.
The Federation had been presenting itself as a small, developing civilization while secretly becoming the dominant military power in known space.
The deception was breathtaking in its scope and audacity.
Why reveal ourselves now? She asked. Because the Korthan Empire has reached the point where it poses an existential threat to galactic civilization, Harrison replied. Our xenosociologists estimate that at their current expansion rate, they will control 90% of habitable worlds within 50 years. After that, they will begin resource depletion protocols that could make interstellar civilization impossible. This was information that Chen had never heard before, and it explained the urgency behind her current orders. The Federation wasn't just concerned about the immediate Korthan threat to individual civilizations. They were worried about the long-term survival of intelligent life in the galaxy.
What about the other galactic powers? Chen asked. Will they accept human intervention? They don't have a choice, Harrison said bluntly. The Galactic Council dissolved.
The major civilizations have either been conquered or have signed non-aggression pacts with the Korthan.
We are the only remaining force capable of stopping them. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with the weight of her new responsibilities. She looked around the command deck, noting the expressions of her senior staff. They had all heard the conversation, and they all understood what it meant. Humanity was about to announce its presence to the galaxy in the most dramatic way possible.
Ma'am, Commander Webb said quietly, incoming transmission from the Valerian vessel.
Captain ZYXI sounds concerned. Put him through. Admiral Chen, the alien captain's voice was tight with tension. We are detecting massive energy signatures from your fleet.
Our sensors are reading power outputs that exceed anything in our databases.
What exactly are you preparing for? Chen considered her response carefully.
The Valerians were about to witness capabilities that would fundamentally change their understanding of the galactic balance of power.
Captain, we are preparing to engage the Korthan fleet when it arrives.
I should warn you that our tactical methods may be unfamiliar. Admiral, with all respect, the Korthan Empire has conquered civilizations with technology far more advanced than what our surveys indicated about humanity. Their weapons can destroy entire cities from orbit, their shields can withstand massive bombardments, and their ships are larger and more heavily armed than anything we have ever encountered. Captain, Chen replied, I appreciate your concern, but you should understand that our survey classifications were deliberately misleading. The Terran Federation has been preparing specifically to fight the Korthan Empire for several decades. On the tactical display, new contacts appeared as the Federation's intelligence network provided real-time updates on Korthan movements. The enemy fleet was massive, approaching through hyperspace in the characteristic wedge formation that had terrorized dozens of civilizations. In 6 hours, they would arrive in Valerian space expecting to face a demoralized and outgunned opponent. Instead, they would find the largest human military force ever assembled, equipped with weapons and technologies that had been developed specifically to counter Korthan advantages. Chen felt a grim satisfaction as she contemplated the surprise they were about to deliver. Admiral, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez reported, we have confirmed visual on the Korthan advance force. They are maintaining standard approach vectors and do not appear to have detected our fleet presence.
How is that possible? Commander Webb asked. We have over 400 ships in this system. Stealth protocols, Rodriguez explained. All Federation vessels are equipped with full-spectrum concealment systems. To Korthan sensors, this system appears empty except for the Valerian cargo vessel.
Chen smiled grimly. The Federation's stealth technology was one of their greatest advantages, developed through decades of observing Korthan sensor systems and carefully studying their detection capabilities. Human ships could operate undetected even in heavily monitored space, allowing for surveillance and intelligence gathering that their enemies never suspected. Ma'am, Captain Park called out, priority message from the UES Normandy.
Admiral Torres reports that 15th Fleet has detected Korthan reserve forces moving toward this sector. Approximately 800 additional vessels en route.
The situation was escalating rapidly. What had begun as a typical Korthan conquest operation was apparently being reinforced to deal with unexpected resistance. The situation was escalating rapidly. What had begun as a typical Korthan conquest operation was apparently being reinforced to deal with unexpected resistance.
Chen studied the updated tactical displays showing the massive Korthan fleet movements. 800 additional vessels represented more than a typical conquest force.
The Empire was clearly taking this situation seriously, which meant they had detected enough human activity to warrant a major response.
Time until Korthan arrival, she asked.
2 hours, 15 minutes for the advance elements, Commander Webb replied.
Main force will arrive 30 minutes later. And our fleet status? 8th Fleet has arrived and is taking position, Webb reported.
Total force strength now stands at 897 vessels.
All ships report ready for combat operations. Chen nodded, feeling the weight of the moment settling over her.
For 50 years, the Terran Federation had prepared for this confrontation. Thousands of simulations, decades of intelligence gathering, and the largest military buildup in human history had all led to this point. In less than 3 hours, humanity would either prove itself capable of stopping the Korthan Empire, or they would join the long list of civilizations that had fallen to imperial conquest.
Signal all fleet commanders, she ordered. Execute Operation Galactic Shield. Authorization Code Alpha 77.
Throughout the assembled human fleet, officers who had trained for this moment their entire careers received the orders they had never expected to actually implement. On the UES Devastator, Captain Jennifer Walsh began coordinating with her squadron of heavy battleships, ships that carried weapons designed specifically to penetrate Korthan armor.
Aboard the UES Phantom, Commander Alex Rivera prepared his stealth destroyer for infiltration operations that would place human ships directly behind enemy lines.
Admiral, Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez announced, Intelligence Division is reporting successful penetration of Korthan communication networks.
We now have real-time access to their tactical planning and command structures.
This was one of the Federation's greatest advantages. While the galactic community had focused on building bigger ships and more powerful weapons, human intelligence services had spent decades infiltrating every major civilization in known space. The Korthan Empire, despite their paranoia and security measures, had been thoroughly compromised by human agents and listening posts.
What are they planning? Chen asked.
Standard Imperial Conquest Doctrine, Rodriguez replied.
Orbital bombardment of all military targets, followed by systematic destruction of population centers until surrender is offered.
They expect total victory within 6 hours.
Chen smiled grimly.
The Korthan Empire had conquered hundreds of civilizations using those exact tactics. Against opponents with inferior technology and limited military coordination, overwhelming firepower applied systematically was devastatingly effective. But they had never faced an opponent that had studied their methods for decades and developed specific countermeasures. "Captain Park," she called to the communication station, "open a channel to Captain ZYXI." The Valerian captain's voice filled the command deck, still carrying obvious stress despite the massive human fleet surrounding his position.
"Admiral Chen, we are detecting the approach of the Korthan main force.
The energy signatures are overwhelming."
"Captain, I want you to understand what you're about to witness," Chen said.
"The Terran Federation has been preparing specifically to fight the Korthan Empire for over 50 years. What you're going to see may not match your understanding of space combat tactics. Admiral, with respect, the Korthan fleet approaching your position includes over 1,000 vessels, including dozens of dreadnoughts capable of destroying planets."
"Are you certain that even your advanced technology can overcome such overwhelming numbers?" Chen looked at the tactical display showing the approaching Imperial fleet.
It was indeed massive, representing enough firepower to conquer entire star systems.
Under normal circumstances, such a force would be absolutely unstoppable. But these were not normal circumstances.
"Captain ZYXI, the Korthan Empire has been successful because they have always fought opponents who were technologically inferior and strategically unprepared.
Today, they face an enemy that has been designed specifically to destroy them." What Chen didn't mention was the true scope of human preparations.
The Federation had built their entire military philosophy around the assumption that they would eventually face the Korthan Empire. Every ship design, every weapon system, every tactical doctrine had been developed with Imperial capabilities in mind. More importantly, human industrial capacity had been geared toward producing the specific types of forces needed for this confrontation. "Admiral," Commander Webb announced, receiving final positioning reports from all fleet elements.
"Operation Galactic Shield is ready for implementation."
Chen took a deep breath, knowing that the next few hours would determine the future of galactic civilization. If the Federation succeeded, the Korthan threat would be eliminated and humanity would emerge as a major galactic power. If they failed, the Empire would gain access to human technology and become virtually unstoppable. "All ships, execute stealth protocols," she ordered. "Take positions for Phase 1 operations." Across the human fleet, advanced concealment systems activated simultaneously. Ships that had been clearly visible on sensors suddenly vanished, their signatures masked by technology that had been perfected through decades of covert operations in hostile space. Within minutes, the massive human fleet had become completely invisible to conventional detection methods.
"Stealth systems active," Commander Webb reported.
"All vessels report successful concealment."
"Korthan fleet status?" Chen inquired. "Advance elements entering sensor range," Lieutenant Colonel Rodriguez replied.
"They appear to be conducting standard reconnaissance sweeps. No indication they have detected our presence."
This was the moment of truth.
If human stealth technology could fool Korthan sensors at close range, the Federation would have a massive tactical advantage.
If not, they would face the largest space battle in galactic history under extremely unfavorable conditions.
"Admiral," Rodriguez called out, "Korthan communications intercepts indicate they believe the system is defended only by the single Valerian vessel. They are proceeding with standard conquest protocols." Chen felt a surge of satisfaction. The Korthan were walking directly into a trap that had been 50 years in the making. Their confidence in their own superiority, the same characteristic that had enabled their galactic conquests, was about to become their greatest weakness.
"Fleet positions?" she asked. "All elements in assigned positions," Webb replied. "Stealth destroyers have achieved close-range reconnaissance positions.
Battle groups are positioned for envelopment maneuvers.
Support elements are ready for Phase 2 operations."
The tactical situation was developing exactly as human strategists had planned. The Korthan fleet was approaching in their standard conquest formation, completely unaware that they were surrounded by hostile forces. More importantly, they were positioning themselves in patterns that human tacticians had studied and prepared to exploit.
"Time to contact?" Chen inquired. "Korthan advance elements will reach engagement range in 23 minutes, Rodriguez reported.
Chen activated the fleet-wide communication system, addressing nearly 900 human vessels positioned throughout the system.
"All ships, this is Admiral Chen.
Today we begin Operation Galactic Shield, the mission we have trained for throughout our careers. The Korthan Empire has terrorized the galaxy for 2,000 years.
Today, that ends.
She paused, knowing that her next words would be recorded in the history of both humanity and galactic civilization. Our objective is not just to defeat this fleet, but to demonstrate that the Korthan Empire is no longer invincible. Every civilization in the galaxy is watching to see whether the Age of Fear and conquest can finally end.
Do not disappoint them.
The response came back from hundreds of human commanders, their voices unified in determination and purpose.
Acknowledged, Admiral. Ready to engage.
Admiral, Captain Park announced, priority transmission from Fleet Command.
Admiral Harrison is standing by.
Chen accepted the communication, and Admiral Harrison's image appeared on the command deck. The older woman's expression was grave but determined.
Sarah, you have full authorization for complete engagement protocols. The Security Council has voted unanimously to authorize any actions necessary to eliminate the Korthan threat.
Understood, Admiral.
We are ready to proceed. Sarah, Harrison said quietly, this is the moment we've been preparing for since the Federation was founded.
The entire future of human civilization depends on what happens in the next few hours. The transmission ended, leaving Chen alone with the weight of command and the knowledge that she was about to initiate the largest military operation in human history. Around her, the command staff of the UES Resolute worked with quiet efficiency, monitoring dozens of systems and coordinating with hundreds of other vessels. Admiral, Commander Webb announced, Korthan main force is dropping out of hyperspace.
Confirmed count, 1,043 vessels, including 18 dreadnoughts.
Chen watched the tactical display update as the full scope of the Korthan fleet became apparent.
It was indeed massive, representing more firepower than most galactic civilizations could assemble.
Under normal circumstances, such a force would be virtually unstoppable.
But these were not normal circumstances.
Hidden throughout the system, nearly 900 human warships waited in perfect concealment, their crews ready to execute battle plans that had been refined through thousands of simulations and decades of preparation.
Signal the fleet, Chen ordered.
All ships, prepare for engagement. Phase 1 begins in 10 minutes.
Captain ZYXI stood transfixed on the bridge of the gentle current, watching the tactical display as it updated with impossible readings.
What had begun as a desperate plea to unknown aliens had somehow transformed into the largest military gathering he had ever witnessed. The display now showed over 600 human vessels, and more continued arriving with each passing hour. Captain, First Officer Nimera called out, her voice tight with disbelief, the humans are requesting permission to establish a command relay through our communication systems. They want to coordinate with additional forces.
Additional forces? ZYXI repeated weakly. How many more ships could they possibly have?
The answer came in the form of another massive hyperspace disturbance that lit up their sensors like a star going nova. When the energy signatures settled, over 200 new contacts appeared on the display, including several that registered as larger than anything ZYXI had ever seen. Those ships, Engineer Pauline whispered, staring at his console, some of them are reading as over 10 kilometers in length.
That's larger than a Korthan dreadnought. Navigation Officer Torben was frantically checking and rechecking his sensor calibrations.
The energy outputs don't make sense, he muttered.
These readings suggest power plants that could supply an entire planet. Communications specialist Vecna looked up from her station with an expression of pure amazement. Captain, I'm receiving tactical data from the human fleet.
They're sharing their complete battle plans with us.
Put it on the main display, ZYXI ordered. The holographic projection shifted to show a three-dimensional tactical map that took ZYXI's breath away.
The human fleet was arranged in multiple defensive layers, with different vessel types positioned according to complex mathematical patterns that suggested sophisticated military doctrine. What struck him most was the sheer scale of the operation.
How many ships do they have? He asked.
Vecna consulted her readings. According to their tactical network, 843 vessels are currently in system, with another 400 en route.
Captain, they're calling this a medium response force. The bridge fell silent as everyone processed this information. Over 1,200 ships constituted a medium response for the humans.
The entire Valerian Republic Navy consisted of fewer than 40 vessels, most of which were converted cargo ships with basic defensive weapons.
There has to be some kind of translation error, Nimera said desperately. no single civilization could maintain that many military vessels.
But, even as she spoke, the evidence continued mounting on their displays. The human ships were not only numerous but incredibly diverse, representing dozens of different classes and configurations.
Some appeared to be traditional warships, but others defied easy classification.
There were vessels that seemed to be pure energy constructs, ships that flickered in and out of sensor range, and massive platforms that registered as mobile space stations. Captain Vecna announced, "Admiral Chen is requesting direct communication."
Put her through. The familiar translated voice filled the bridge, but now ZYXI could hear undertones that suggested massive authority and responsibility. Captain ZYXI, I wanted to update you on our operational status. The Terran Combined Fleet is now at full deployment strength for this sector.
Admiral, ZYXI began carefully, we are overwhelmed by the scale of your response.
Our initial distress call was simply a desperate plea from a dying civilization. We never expected. Captain, we understand your confusion, Chin interrupted gently. What you're seeing represents 50 years of preparation for exactly this scenario.
The Terran Federation has been monitoring galactic affairs for decades, and we have been building military capabilities specifically to counter the Korthan threat. But, the survey reports indicated that humans were a primitive species with limited technology, ZYXI protested. The survey reports were deliberately misleading, Chen replied. We found it advantageous to be underestimated while we prepared for this day. On the tactical display, new information began appearing as the human fleet shared their intelligence networks. ZYXI watched in amazement as detailed profiles of Korthan ships, weapons, and tactics filled his screens. The level of information was incredible, suggesting that the humans had been studying the Empire for years.
How do you know so much about Korthan capabilities? He asked.
We have been observing them for quite some time, Chen replied.
Terran intelligence has assets throughout Korthan space. We know their ship designs, their tactical doctrines, their command structures, and their strategic objectives. This was beyond anything ZYXI had imagined. The humans had not only built a massive fleet, they had also developed an intelligence network that penetrated the most secretive and paranoid military organization in the galaxy. Admiral, he said slowly, what exactly is the Terran Federation?
There was a pause before Chin responded, and, when she did, her voice carried a weight that suggested she was revealing long-held secrets. Captain, the Terran Federation consists of over 200 inhabited star systems, with a total population exceeding 20 billion humans. We maintain 12 separate fleet commands, 6 major shipbuilding complexes, and the largest intelligence network in galactic space. The numbers were staggering. 20 billion people made the humans one of the largest single civilizations in known space, comparable to the major galactic powers that had dominated politics for millennia. The idea that such a civilization had remained hidden was almost incomprehensible.
Why reveal yourselves now? ZYXI asked.
Because the Korthan Empire has reached the point where it threatens the long-term survival of galactic civilization, Chen replied. Our xenosociologists estimate that at their current expansion rate, they will control sufficient resources to begin systematic sterilization protocols within 50 years.
Systematic sterilization protocols.
ZYXI felt his scales go cold at the implications.
The Korthan were not just conquering civilizations for resources and territory.
They were preparing to eliminate all potential competition for galactic dominance. How do you intend to stop them? He asked. Complete destruction of their military capabilities, Chen replied without hesitation. The Terran Federation has determined that the Korthan Empire represents an existential threat that cannot be contained or negotiated with.
We intend to eliminate them as a viable military force. The casual confidence in that statement was breathtaking. The humans were not talking about defending against the Korthan or even defeating the current attack. They were planning to destroy an empire that controlled thousands of star systems and commanded millions of ships. Captain, Vecna called out urgently, I'm detecting massive hyperspace disturbances. Multiple fleets dropping out of FTL throughout the system. ZYXI turned to the main display and felt his heart stop.
The Korthan Empire had arrived in overwhelming force. Instead of the 300 ships they had expected, over 800 vessels materialized throughout the system, including dozens of the massive dreadnoughts that could destroy planets.
But what happened next defied everything ZYXI thought he knew about space combat.
The human fleet simply vanished. One moment, over 1,000 Terran ships were visible on the tactical display. The next moment, they had disappeared completely, leaving only empty space and the approaching Korthan Armada.
What happened? Nimera gasped. Where did they go? Stealth systems activated, Admiral Chen's voice announced calmly. All Terran vessels are now operating in full concealment mode. Captain ZYXI, I recommend you move your ship to a safe distance. Combat operations will begin in approximately 10 minutes.
ZYXI stared at the display showing hundreds of Korthan ships moving toward what appeared to be an empty system. The idea that over 1,000 human vessels could simply disappear from all sensor detection was beyond his understanding of physics.
Admiral, he transmitted, how is this possible?
Our sensors show no trace of your fleet. Terran stealth technology operates on principles that most galactic civilizations have not yet discovered, Chen replied. We can remain undetected even at close range to Korthan sensors. As if to demonstrate this capability, the tactical display suddenly showed detailed tracking information for every Korthan vessel in the system. The humans were not only invisible, they were providing real-time intelligence on enemy movements with incredible precision. Beginning tactical operations, Admiral Chen announced. All Valerian vessels should maintain current position and observe. What followed was unlike any space battle ZYXI had ever witnessed or imagined. The Korthan fleet had arranged itself in their standard conquest formation, with heavy dreadnoughts at the center and screening vessels spread in protective arcs. They were moving confidently toward the Valerian position, apparently unaware that they were surrounded by hostile forces.
Then, space itself seemed to come alive.
The first indication of attack was the sudden appearance of brilliant energy beams that materialized from empty space and struck Korthan vessels with devastating accuracy. The beams were unlike anything in ZYXI's experience, appearing as focused streams of pure energy that cut through Korthan shields as if they didn't exist.
Impossible, Engineer Pal9 whispered. Those beams are cutting through dreadnought armor like it's paper.
More weapons began firing from invisible positions throughout the system. Missile volleys appeared from nowhere, striking Korthan ships with overwhelming precision. Strange energy fields began forming around enemy vessels, somehow disrupting their power systems and causing critical failures in their weapons and shields. The Korthan response was swift but ineffective. Their massive guns fired in all directions, trying to locate enemies that their sensors couldn't detect. Their missiles launched toward empty space, guided by targeting systems that had no valid contacts. Within minutes, the most feared military force in the galaxy was flailing helplessly against opponents they couldn't see or touch. Captain, Torben called out in amazement, the Korthan are taking massive casualties, but I can't detect any human ships.
How are they doing this?
The answer came as several human vessels suddenly materialized directly behind Korthan formations, fired devastating volleys at point-blank range, and then vanished again before return fire could be directed at them. The attacks were coordinated with impossible precision, suggesting communication and coordination systems that operated faster than anything ZYXI had ever encountered. Admiral Chen, he transmitted, your weapons, they're unlike anything we've ever seen. Terran military technology has been developed specifically to counter Korthan advantages, Chen replied, her voice calm despite the massive battle raging around them.
We spent decades analyzing their shields, their armor, and their defensive systems.
Our weapons are designed to neutralize their technological advantages. On the display, Korthan dreadnoughts were dying. Ships that had terrorized dozens of civilizations were being systematically destroyed by weapons they couldn't see and couldn't defend against.
The psychological effect on the surviving Korthan crews was devastating. Their perfect formation began to collapse as individual ships broke ranks and attempted to flee.
But there was nowhere to run. Human ships appeared at every potential escape route, blocking hyperspace exit points and destroying any vessel that attempted to leave the system. The Korthan Empire, which had conquered half the galaxy through superior mobility and overwhelming firepower, found itself trapped and helpless. This is impossible, ZYXI murmured, watching the most powerful military force in galactic history being systematically annihilated.
How can this be happening?
Captain, Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of grim satisfaction. The Korthan Empire has spent 2,000 years conquering civilizations that couldn't fight back. Today, they discover what happens when they face opponents who have been preparing specifically to destroy them. As the battle continued, ZYXI began to understand that he was witnessing more than just a military engagement.
He was watching the end of an era.
For 2 millennia, the Korthan Empire had been the dominant force in galactic affairs, shaping the political development of hundreds of civilizations through fear and conquest.
But the humans had changed everything. In a single battle, they were demonstrating capabilities that rendered Korthan military supremacy obsolete. More importantly, they were revealing the existence of a civilization that had been secretly preparing for this moment for decades. Admiral, ZYXI transmitted, "What happens after this battle?"
"After this battle, Captain, the galaxy learns that the Korthan Empire is no longer invincible," Chen replied. "And every civilization that has been living in fear will discover that there is another option." As ZYXI watched the last Korthan dreadnoughts succumb to human weapons, he realized that his desperate distress call had accidentally triggered the beginning of a new galactic age. 3 months after the Battle of Valerian Prime, the galaxy was transforming in ways that no one could have predicted. Captain ZYXI stood in the newly constructed Galactic Coordination Center on Valeria, watching through massive transparent aluminum windows as human and alien ships moved in coordinated patterns throughout the system. What had once been a quiet merchant hub had become the de facto capital of a new galactic alliance.
Final casualty reports, Captain, First Officer Nimera announced, approaching with a datapad.
She had been promoted to serve as liaison between the Valerian Republic and the Terran Federation, a position that required her to process information that still seemed impossible to believe.
Korthan losses? ZYXI asked, though he already knew the numbers would be staggering. Complete destruction of the 8th Imperial Fleet, Nimera reported. 837 vessels eliminated, no survivors. Human casualties, 0. 0 casualties. In a battle against the most feared military force in galactic history, the humans had suffered no losses whatsoever. The Korthan Empire had been dealt a crushing defeat without inflicting any damage in return. The implications were still reverberating throughout known space. Status of follow-up operations? ZYXI inquired. Nimera consulted her datapad.
The Terran Federation has launched coordinated strikes against 17 Korthan strongholds in the past month.
All targets have been neutralized with minimal resistance. Intelligence reports suggest the Empire is in complete strategic collapse. Through the windows, ZYXI could see the evidence of this new reality.
Human ships moved through Valerian space with casual confidence, their advanced stealth systems occasionally flickering to reveal massive vessels that dwarfed anything previously seen in galactic space. More importantly, ships from dozens of other civilizations had begun arriving, their crews eager to make contact with the mysterious power that had ended the Korthan threat.
Admiral Chen is requesting a meeting, Nimera added.
She wants to discuss the establishment of permanent coordination protocols. ZYXI nodded, still struggling to process how quickly everything had changed. 3 months ago, the Valerian Republic had been a dying civilization facing inevitable conquest. Today, they were hosting diplomatic representatives from across the galaxy, all seeking to establish relationships with the Terran Federation. "Send my acceptance," he said. "And, Nimera, include a request for updated information on human military capabilities.
The other species are asking questions that we cannot answer."
This was perhaps the most challenging aspect of the new situation. Representatives from dozens of civilizations wanted to know about human technology, population, industrial capacity, and strategic intentions. The problem was that every answer the Terrans provided only raised more questions.
20 minutes later, Admiral Sarah Chen materialized in ZYXI's office, transported by a human teleportation system that operated on principles no one else understood.
Despite months of regular contact, ZYXI still found the Admiral's presence slightly overwhelming. She represented a civilization that had fundamentally altered the balance of galactic power, yet she spoke with casual confidence about reshaping interstellar politics.
"Admiral," ZYXI greeted her, "thank you for coming. The Galactic Representatives Council has several urgent questions."
Chen smiled, settling into a chair that adjusted automatically to accommodate her human physiology.
"I imagine they do. What specifically are they asking about?" "Everything," ZYXI replied honestly. "Your military strength, your territorial claims, your intentions regarding former Korthan space, and, most importantly, whether other civilizations should consider the Terran Federation a threat." "Those are fair questions," Chen acknowledged.
"What have you told them?"
"That we don't know," ZYXI admitted. "Admiral, 3 months ago our survey data indicated that humans were a primitive species with limited technology.
Today, you command the most powerful military force in galactic history.
We have no framework for understanding what the Terran Federation actually represents."
Chen was quiet for a moment, apparently considering how much information to share. When she spoke, her voice carried the weight of long-held secrets finally being revealed. Captain, the Terran Federation consists of over 300 star systems, with a combined population of 28 billion humans. We maintain active military forces exceeding 15,000 vessels, with production capacity to double that number within 2 years. The numbers were staggering. ZYXI had suspected that the humans were more powerful than they had initially indicated, but the true scope of their civilization was beyond anything he had imagined. Our industrial capacity includes 7 major shipbuilding complexes, each capable of producing dreadnought-class vessels at rates that exceed the combined output of all former galactic powers, Chen continued. We have established permanent monitoring stations in over 50% of known space, and our intelligence networks have been gathering information on galactic civilizations for decades.
Why did you remain hidden? ZYXI asked.
Because we learned early that this galaxy was dominated by aggressive powers that viewed new civilizations as either potential subjects or potential threats, Chen replied.
When we first achieved interstellar travel, we discovered evidence of the Korthan Empire within 5 years. Our initial reaction was to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best.
This explanation made sense, but it raised additional questions about human intentions and capabilities.
Admiral, what are your government's plans for former Korthan territory?
Over 2,000 star systems and billions of alien populations are now without effective government.
We're establishing transitional administrations in consultation with local populations, Chen said.
Our policy is to restore self-governance as quickly as possible while providing security and humanitarian assistance.
And if civilizations prefer to maintain independence from any human oversight?
Then, they are free to do so, as long as they don't engage in aggressive expansion or persecution of civilian populations.
Chen's expression grew serious. Captain, the Terran Federation has no interest in becoming a galactic empire.
We intervened against the Korthan because they represented an existential threat to all intelligent life. Now that the threat is neutralized, we want to establish a stable system that prevents similar threats from emerging.
Through the office windows, ZYXI could see evidence of this policy in action.
Human ships were working alongside vessels from dozens of other civilizations, coordinating massive relief operations for worlds devastated by Korthan occupation. The scale of the humanitarian effort was unprecedented, involving resources and coordination that had never been seen in galactic history.
What about military cooperation? ZYXI asked. Several civilizations are requesting defense agreements with the Terran Federation. We're establishing a mutual defense framework, Chen replied.
Any civilization that agrees to basic principles of non-aggression and civilian protection can request Federation security guarantees. In return, we ask for cooperation in monitoring potential threats and sharing intelligence on military developments. This was the foundation of what many analysts were calling the New Galactic Order, a system where the Terran Federation's overwhelming military superiority provided security for smaller civilizations in exchange for cooperation and information sharing. It was completely different from the previous system, where major powers had competed for dominance while smaller civilizations struggled to survive. Admiral, ZYXI said carefully, there is one question that every species is asking, but no one wants to voice directly. They want to know what happens if the Terran Federation decides to become expansionist like the Korthan, Chen said, correctly interpreting his hesitation.
Yes. Chen was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the bustling space traffic around Valeria.
When she spoke, her voice carried a weight that suggested she had considered this question extensively.
Captain, that's a fear that we take very seriously. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely.
The Terran Federation has built-in safeguards specifically to prevent the kind of imperial expansion that the Korthan practiced.
What kind of safeguards?
Our government is based on democratic principles with extensive checks and balances, Chen explained. Military command is distributed among multiple services with overlapping jurisdictions. Most importantly, our constitution specifically prohibits territorial expansion through conquest or coercion.
ZYXI found this reassuring but recognized that constitutional principles could be changed if circumstances demanded it. And if those safeguards fail? Chen smiled grimly.
Then, the galaxy will face the same problem it faced with the Korthan, except with opponents who are significantly more capable. Captain, I can't offer absolute guarantees about what humanity might become in 100 or 1,000 years.
What I can tell you is that our current leadership is genuinely committed to building a stable, peaceful galactic community. A soft chime indicated an incoming priority communication. Nemera's voice came through the office speakers. Captain, we're receiving reports of a situation in the Andorian sector. An unknown military force has attacked 3 Federation relief convoys. Chen immediately stood, her relaxed demeanor shifting to complete alertness. Details? Limited information available, Nemera replied. The attacking force used unidentified ship designs and weapons that were effective against Federation escort vessels. This was the first time since the end of the Korthan War that anyone had successfully attacked Terran forces. ZYXI watched Chen's expression carefully, curious about how the Federation would respond to this new challenge. Signal the fleet, Chen ordered. Deploy 7th Fleet to the Andorian sector immediately. I want full intelligence analysis and identification of the attacking force within 6 hours. The response was swift and decisive, characteristic of the efficiency that had made the Federation so formidable. But ZYXI noticed something else in Chen's reaction, not anger or vindictiveness, but professional concern about a threat to civilian populations under Federation protection. Admiral, he said, if this represents a new military threat, what are the Federation's intentions? The same as always, Chen replied. Protect innocent populations and neutralize threats to galactic stability. If this unknown force wants to challenge Federation security guarantees, they'll discover that the Korthan were not our only opponents we prepared to fight. As Chen departed to coordinate the Federation response, ZYXI reflected on how completely his world had changed. 3 months ago, his species had been on the verge of extinction, desperately sending distress calls into unknown space. Today, the Valerian Republic was part of a new galactic community protected by the most powerful military force in known history. The irony was not lost on him. By accidentally contacting the Terran Federation, the Valerians had triggered a chain of events that had reshaped galactic civilization. The desperate plea for help had revealed the existence of a hidden superpower that had been preparing for decades to reshape the galaxy. Through his office windows, ZYXI watched human ships accelerating toward hyperspace jump points, responding to the new threat with the same overwhelming efficiency that had destroyed the Korthan Empire. He suspected that whatever force had attacked the relief convoys was about to learn the same lesson that had cost the Korthan their empire. In the new galactic order, threats to civilian populations and peaceful commerce were met with swift, decisive, and overwhelming force. The Terran Federation had not revealed themselves to become galactic conquerors, but they had made it clear that they would not tolerate anyone else filling that role either. As he prepared reports for the Galactic Representatives Council, ZYXI realized that his accidental distress call had done more than save the Valerian Republic. It had announced the beginning of a new era in galactic history, one where the strong protected the weak rather than consuming them. The question now was whether this new order would prove stable and lasting, or whether it would eventually face challenges that even the mighty Terran Federation could not overcome. Only time would tell, but for the first time in his life, ZYXI was optimistic about the future of galactic civilization. The age of the Korthan was over. The age of humanity had begun.